So what you're hearing now, I'm sure you guys have heard it, I hear it all the time, they're calling me or us Democrats, they're calling us radical and unhinged and all of those things. And I'm sitting here with a poll in Tennessee that was done where 72% support Medicaid expansion, 65% support the Black Lives Matter movement, 88% support paid family leave. And so what I'm saying is they're the radicals. We agree with the working folks in Tennessee right now. They're the ones who don't agree. Their constituents want certain legislation that they're not passing and they're blocking in committee because the special interests tell them to. And please go vote and take 10 of your very best friends and maybe just somebody you happen to run into.
Okay, I want to vote, but I feel safer sending in an absentee ballot. How do I do that?
To request an absentee ballot, simply visit sos.tn.gov and scroll down to Elections. Click on Absentee Voting, then click on Download the Absentee Request Form. You can fill out the form in the browser window and then print it and sign it, or you can print it first and fill out the entire form by hand. Make sure to carefully review the reasons for your application and select the one that best fits your situation. Worried about COVID-19? If you have a health condition that puts you at high risk, choose the third option. If you are caring for someone who is ill or high risk, choose the fourth option. Make sure to sign and date your application and then submit it by mail, fax, or email to your county election commission. You can find the address for your election commission at govotetn.com. If you voted by mail in August, you will not automatically receive a ballot for the November election. You must request it. The deadline to submit your application is October 27th. But don't wait. Return your application as soon as you know you will vote absentee. Once you receive your ballot, fill it out and return it immediately. Delays with the mail could cause your ballot to take a while to arrive, and if it isn't received by Election Day, your vote won't count. Our guest today is Gloria Johnson. She's the Tennessee State House Representative for District 13, and she's running for re-election.
Hello.
Representative Johnson, thanks so much for being on the show. I want to start out, so your dad was a special agent in the FBI. What was it like growing up with a parent who was a special agent in law enforcement?
Well, that's another show, really. It was really interesting, and you don't know that you're having this really wild life that other folks aren't having. When I was very young, we lived in Los Angeles and San Diego. Dad was involved in getting Frank Sinatra's son back when he was kidnapped. And then we moved to Jackson, Mississippi, where there was a lot of the racial events going on. And less than a mile from our house, the KKK blew up a Jewish synagogue. And Dad had to go out and arrest those folks. I mean, he knew what it was. They had been watching them. He and his partner drive up in one of the guys' driveway and arrest the three of them that did it. And then they threatened the rest of the guys that they didn't round up, threatened to kill our family. And so we had to move out of our house for a few weeks, and the FBI guys moved in. And we didn't really know. I was 5, I think. And we just thought we were going to stay at our friend's house and wasn't this fun, but that's what was actually happening. So we had a lot of interesting things throughout my life because of that.
Do you think it illuminated you to maybe like social issue? Like, did he ever, I'm sure there were things he couldn't discuss with you, but
right.
Did he ever kind of debrief with the family sometimes and talk about, I mean, do you think you got a bigger, like a wider worldview because of his career and your relationship?
I think I got a wider worldview, and I just like this incredibly strong sense of justice that I know came from my father. My father's partner at the time was Black, and that was unusual. And so, and it was not a thing for him. But it was, I was exposed to a lot of things, and I had a lot of stuff pounded in my head about, about how to be careful and how to act in situations you know, with law enforcement, but just really understanding justice. My father was FBI, but he was also a very compassionate person. And there were times when he was a lawyer, so he was in charge of different things. Plus he was also like legal advisor for whichever office he was in. So he was also involved in a lot of the court cases. And he was able to see how somebody got where they did, you know, and what transpired to put them in the position that they were in, and really had a deeper understanding of that. And he did try to convey that to us, and always that whole empathy and trying to, you still have to, I've always been, my friends in Colorado always called me, I don't even want to say this out loud anymore, but they used to call me Little Miss Law and Order, because I was always telling people what to do legally in certain situations, because my dad, you know, never have an accident where you don't call the police or don't exchange information and all of that stuff. And if you were ever to get arrested, never talk to anybody without a lawyer. It just, all of those things drummed in my head. But because of the knowledge of how things can happen and spin out of control, if we don't have those processes in place for everyone.
Can you expand on that a little bit as it relates to the current climate with police protests and police brutality charges? And, you know, how are there things that you see that could be fixes for the situation that we're currently in?
Oh, you know, there are all kinds of things that we can be doing. If we all come to the table, everybody deserves a seat at the table here. Everybody deserves to be safe in their community. I don't care what sex you are, what age you are, what race you are, what religion you are. You should feel safe in your community, and we can do that. And the reality is, just because you believe, as I do, that Black Lives Matter, does not believe that you are anti-police. But what we have to do is make it work for everybody. And so there is nobody on the universe that could say I'm anti-law enforcement, because it's how I grew up, it's what I believe. But my dad would tell me that things can go wrong. And my dad would always tell me, if you ever get pulled over, any of these things, you know, just do everything right, because sometimes there's some bad seeds out there, and you've got to be ready for it. You've got to do everything you can. But you know, that's in every job there is. But the problem is, this can be dangerous with this type of situation. And so, but I never had to be concerned like my friends who are Black have to be concerned. You know, I'm still a white girl, and it's going to be different how I'm treated. But the reality is, everybody doesn't have that safety net that some of us have.
All right. Switching gears just a little bit, can you talk to us about community schools and why you're such a strong advocate for those programs?
Well, it's really interesting, because it's my 27 years as a special education teacher. You see the kids that have really struggled, and you have to look at them differently as far as, okay, how are we going to get this kid bumped up several grade levels, not just one for this year? What do they need? What's best for them? And almost all of my years were in underserved schools and underserved communities. And so what you find out is so much of that is connected to why students aren't being successful. And all of the data bears that out. Middle class kids typically do as well as anyone else in the world. It is our lower socioeconomic kids, our kids who aren't sure if they're going to get a meal that night, who aren't able to go to the doctor, whose parents can't go to the doctor. All of this is just systemic, and it has an effect on how kids learn. And so if you provide those wraparound services, a community school is your traditional neighborhood school. I live half a block right up here from Belmora School. They are now a community school. And what happens there is you stay open in the afternoon. Most of the time you stay open in the afternoon, like 3 to 7. Belmora doesn't, they go out to different places, but they're still getting served at those times. But the schools that stay open from 3 to 7, they have all of the academics subjects, they get an enhancement in that, but not in the same ways, more fun ways that they teach it in the afternoon. And then they have art and music and circus. And then they have these massive community gardens where they can work in them. Their parents can come work in them. They can take home vegetables for the weekend. And the really cool thing is Pond Gap got a grant from DuPont, I think it was, and they built an outdoor kitchen. So now they come in and they have cooking classes with the parents and the kids to prepare some of the things that they grow in the garden, because it may not be a typical thing to prepare that most families prepare at home. So it's really just a great way. And those community schools all have a meal in the evening where the whole family can come. And then that's for the kids. For the parents, they can come down, take classes to get their GED, take courses to learn how to write a resume. At one point, Pond Gap offered auto mechanics, because what they found in their community was one car problem could put somebody out of work because they didn't have transportation and all of that. So the local community decides what it needs, and they bring that to that school for the parents, for the kids, for the community. And so you're addressing the whole child. Pond Gap, they also have either nurse practitioners, social workers, mental health workers. All of those things are provided. And that is why some kids aren't being successful. It's those support services that they need. It's not because they're not bright. It's not because the teachers at their school are bad. They need more than the typical school offers.
So staying on education, you co-sponsored HB 2790, which requires salary schedules to reflect the promised increases in teachers' paychecks. The last update says that it was taken off notice in the K-12 subcommittee. So I was going to see if you could educate me and probably a lot of viewers on what that means, kind of just mechanically speaking in the legislature. And then the other question, kind of the sub question to that is, you know, the Republican legislators in our state are very eager to pass heartbeat bills and things like that. Why do you think that they're really, really concerned about unborn fetuses and not so concerned about living, breathing children and their education, seemingly? Because this seems like a really important thing, and these education initiatives are something we should really be pushing.
Right. No, absolutely. They seem to forget about the child as soon as it is born. You're correct. They don't want to give the parents health care. They don't want SNAP benefits to go to those kids who desperately need them. They don't want to address maternal mortality rates, all of those things. And I wish I could tell you why. The one thing, you know, and it's hard to say sometimes, but I'm known for just speaking what I think. I really feel like there's a distrust of poor people, and that they think people are where they are because they haven't worked hard enough. They don't understand that these folks out there didn't get the same start that they did, and so they are struggling and need some extra help to get going. And so healthcare is a perfect example. If we were to expand Medicaid, if you look at the study out of Michigan, when they did a study on their Medicaid expansion, what they looked at was low-income families. And what they found was it was a huge boost to low-income families in Michigan. And it reduced their debt, and it also gave them the ability to get loans. So what they found were people were able to get cars who didn't have transportation before, so had to rely on working near their home. So they were able to get car loans and get cars to get a better job, to move further up. And so what they found in Michigan was it was a huge boost to their economy. And that the 10% that you eventually have to pay, they said they will never struggle to pay that 10% because of how much it boosted up. Everybody moved up a bump, moved up a level to improve their standard of living, and that improves the economy.
What did you learn from your time organizing for the Obama campaign, and how do you think those lessons can be leveraged in other counties in East Tennessee and across our state?
Well, I think that the Obama organizing model is fabulous. It is, the knowledge that I gained is just useful in so many areas. It's kind of unbelievable. You can organize on issues, you can organize for candidates, all sorts of things. And that's why I had retired from teaching, and I just, I still love to teach and I still stay in it in some form or fashion. But I took all these young people and we had a fellowship program that trained up a bunch of young folks. And I just love it because those young people that we trained up through OFA are working all the campaigns across the state. They're also organizing in North Carolina and Kentucky. Several of them have been to Kentucky. So the skills that it gives you on how to make, get the message out. I like to take, when we started that organizing program with Obama and our focus was expanding Medicaid, the approval rate for Medicaid expansion was around 40 to 44%. By the time we had done that program for a couple of years, it was up to 66%. And so, we worked statewide with teams. We taught them how to do press conferences, how to highlight personal stories, because really personal stories is what changed the whole dynamic. When people hear about their neighbors on their street, who by all intents and purposes, it's, fancy neighborhoods and everything. People were terrified of losing their insurance due to pre-existing conditions. And, it can happen to anybody. It happened to my sister and her husband. They lost it was a third generation business. They lost the business, they lost their home, while both of my nephews were in Afghanistan because she needed her fourth brain surgery and the insurance dropped her.
Well, that's a great segue then into, we've asked other candidates that have been on the show. So how do you get around the "I don't want Obamacare" statements from people that actually would benefit from expanded Medicaid? And in fact, it's in Kentucky, there were actual, people in Kentucky who said, "Oh, I love the Affordable Care Act. Just don't give me Obamacare." And it's hard not to kind of chuckle and say, but there's clearly a disconnect where people they don't understand that these are the same thing, and it's just that this kind of like conservative propaganda machine has made Obamacare these evil words, and really people do they do like being on the Affordable Care Act. They do like that. So how do you effectively reach voters like that and kind of navigate around the, well, I don't want Obamacare thing?
I probably don't talk to a lot of those folks who just will not even take health care if it's given to them because that's where it came from. The reality is I spend most of my time talking to people who are listening, who can change their mind and all of that. The reality is there's some folks who will never change their mind. But now, even just recently, there was some polling. And so the polls are going anywhere from 66% to 72% believe or support expanding Medicaid. And so it's shocking to me, and this is what I'm trying to do with message, because I just read in a national publication that even at the federal level, they're giving up the attacks on the Affordable Care Act because it's so popular. They're finding that taking away would be awful. Tennessee hasn't caught up there yet, but so what you're hearing now, I'm sure you guys have heard it. I hear all the time. They're calling me or us Democrats. They're calling us radical and unhinged and all of those things. And I'm sitting here with a poll in Tennessee that was done where 72% support Medicaid expansion, 65% support the Black Lives Matter movement, 88% support paid family leave. And so what I'm saying is they're the radicals. We agree with the working folks in Tennessee right now. They're the ones who don't agree. Their constituents want certain legislation that they're not passing, and they're blocking in committee because the special interests tell them to. My paid family leave bill, it's now we call it the Paid Family Insurance Act, because it's kind of like insurance. It's not paid by the state, doesn't cost the state a penny. It's not paid by the business, small businesses, they do not have to pay it. It's paid by the employer. It's the employee. It's the most conservative one. It's working in a lot of states well. And it's about the cost of a cup of coffee, between $3 and $4 a week is what it costs the employee. And then when they need it, when they want to have a child, they have a sick parent, they get a long-term illness themselves, they'll have 12 weeks paid leave. And the only people to speak against that bill were the NFIB, which is supposedly a small business organization. But if you read about them, they're 90% funded by the Koch brothers. And they're not really about small business at all. I think only somewhere between 6 and 10% of small businesses in Tennessee belong to their organization. But they act as if but they are in every meeting talking down every bill that benefits working. We used to have bill review, which to me was I thought it was an inappropriate meeting. We got together, the committee got together and talked about bills, not publicly. And so, but all the lobbyists were there. So this is not a public meeting, but all the lobbyists are there, and you're talking about all the bills. And of course, that's when they start going off on my bill about how, oh, it's terrible for small business. I said, excuse me, here's what the statistics show. It's great for small business because they can get the same employees that bigger business and corporations that can offer that get. So you're leveling the field for small businesses, and it's actually beneficial. And then after that, they were just like, well, we just don't think the math works. Well, you could talk to these other states where the math is working, and cities and counties are also doing it. Nashville's doing it. They're doing a more employee-employer match, but they are doing it, and they do like it. So they are out of touch. They are the ones that are against what the majority of Tennesseans want to raise the wage. They refuse to raise the wage. Just refuse. They're the radicals, in my view.
Yeah, I would totally agree. It doesn't match kind of the polling statistics, from the state and around the country. So then that leads to my next question. I live in West Knoxville. I say, like, you can be downtown and it's real blue and then lighter blue and then starts to turn pink and then it's like very, very red. So how do we get Gloria Johnson's elected in West Knoxville? I totally agree. This is what the majority of Tennesseans want, these things that we're called radicals for. That includes people in West Knoxville. How do we get away from people who represent West Knoxville sharing Breitbart articles on social media to people who are co-sponsoring legislation that's impactful to Tennesseans?
Yeah, and those kind of ties in too with what China asked earlier, and I didn't address, and it's a big thing in my head, and I wanted to, is I think that rural organizing is critical in Tennessee right now, because if we can pick up some more seats this time, but if we really want to turn Tennessee blue, we've got to get back to those Democrats in the rural areas. And the only way that you can organize in a rural area, and this would go same for suburban and urban in a way, is people within that community talking to their neighbors. I can't go into Fentress County and organize those folks. What I would do is look to find somebody in there who cared about healthcare or cared about public education, was well known in the community, not necessarily politically well known, but just to be someone who cares and works for these issues, and get them to find the people that also care and get them out and get them educated on those issues. But it's the same thing that, I would do in West Knoxville, is keep finding those people who care about those issues, bring them together to discuss those issues, how we can put them forward, because that's where you're going to find your good candidates. A lot of times politicians like to go to the typical places to find someone to run for office. Well, who's coming off county commission, or who's, but we need to look to people in our community who are active, who are engaged, who, teachers, people in their churches, people in their neighborhood organizations, people whose businesses are really interactive with the community. Let's not go to the same folks. Let's find people who deeply care about their community. Let them get out there and learn about the issues that they care about, the issues that the people in their district care about. And just, it sort of naturally happens where pretty soon, you know, people start asking them to step up. And I think that, you know, I grew up in West Knoxville. I lived in Gulf Park, and I went to Farragut. So I'm very familiar. But, you know, there are a lot of good folks out there. And we just need to find a way to talk to them. A lot of us don't talk. I hear so many people say that they don't really bring up politics with their neighbor or with their coworkers or stuff like that because it's so divisive. But I ask people to still continue to try to find ways to talk about it, because it's going to mean so much more coming from your neighbor than it's going to mean coming from somebody outside the community coming in. You know, I'm gonna listen to my coworker a lot more than I would probably listen to someone coming from out of state to talk to me about something. So just keep having those conversations, building relationships, and finding those people that connect on the issues that you also care about and working on those issues together.
So in the context of, like, you know, talking about politics with other people, what's your social interaction like, just on a not, you know, and less of a, like, when you're not on a TV show or something, or on a radio show or debating, what's your like day-to-day social interaction with some of the more conservative members of our state legislature? Like, I mean,
oh, yeah.
How do you, I mean, you're very smart and outspoken and driven, and you've got all this like great policy going, you're co-sponsoring legislation and things like that. Like, you're sitting next to somebody who's just posted a bunch of disinformation to Facebook to rile up to pander to their section of voters in their district. Like, how do you talk to somebody like that in a professional setting?
It's interesting. You know, there are extremes and not so extremes, so it differs. But you're right. I mean, I don't think that what they don't understand a lot of times is we're going to see this in the next month. They're going to start attacking me with the most hideous ads and mail and stuff you've ever seen in your life. Haven't seen it done to a lot of other people. Just recently saw it done to, some of it done to Patty Bounds up in 16 because of the school choice stuff. But it's really, really ugly. And 2 years ago, my sister was dying. My mom was sitting with her through the month before the election. So mom's sitting there watching these trash commercials of me, or, you know, when she's doing digital, that's all she sees while she's sitting with her other daughter who's dying. And I'm just thinking, I got to go back and work with these guys, because most of it was paid for by a House GOP caucus. And they expect me to walk in and act like everything's cool. And I'm always professional. I've never one time been rude to one of them. I've never said a mean word. I have never, ever done any of those things. Always professional. But it's hard for me to forget about that when I walk back in there. We don't do those things. They've got, you know, that they're not getting that with, you know, it's just not at that level. And so I don't know if you guys remember, in the first year of our session in 2019, at the end of the session, Cassida was kind of off his chain. And that last day, we were talking about block grants. And a lot of their people had left. They were just like, I'm tired. I thought we were going to be done by now. I'm going to the house. And they left. And we sort of realized, hey, they don't have a quorum. Let's go out across the hall and talk about how we're going to do this vote. So we start to leave the room, and Cassida calls security. He calls the highway patrol to lock us in the room. And so as we're heading out the door, they're coming in and they try to push us back. And then we kind of, we're going out and they just shoved us all back. That was the first time I was shoved by highway patrol. And I was just like, wow. And I was sort of in the back of the group. G.A. Hardaway was up front, and I think they kind of grabbed him around the neck. And you don't grab G.A. around the neck, he's going to push back. We got out the door, but that was something that was just shocking to me, that they had tried to shove me back in the room with the rest of, with some other of my members. But we got out and we went into the other room and we held a press conference about what just happened. So after we, do all that, we decide what we're going to do on the vote. We go back in and, they're like, we can send highway patrol after you. Well, we know that. We're just going across the hall. We're not we're not driving home like your members did, And so we go back in, do the vote. Of course, we didn't win the vote, but, and then it was over. We left. And, I'm always like writing stuff down so that I can remember what just happened. And their leader came up to me and reached his hand out to shake my hand. And I was just like, I can't. He goes, oh, don't be like that, Gloria. I said, I was just shoved back into this room. And you all didn't say a word, except a couple of them were trying to say they shoved the highway patrol and they needed to be arrested. And no one ever said, wow, we shouldn't have done that. That shouldn't have happened. You all shouldn't have gotten shoved. Nothing. Just come back in, do your vote, and then shake hands and we all go home. I couldn't shake his hand. I remember Elizabeth Warren in that debate when she couldn't shake a hand. I could not physically shake his hand. And I was just, and not that I wasn't mad at him per se, but to not address what just happened and act like everything was okay, I don't do that. I address the issues. I'll tell you another one. This happened, in the last bit of session. We were memorializing. Well, I can't even say it. Memorializing a girl who had been shot in Nashville, shot and killed. She was a teenager. She was 17, and she was a basketball star at her school. She was also gay and had started a gay rights club at her school, really helping kids feel better about themselves, all of that. We were going to do a resolution like we do for people who have died in your district. Harold Love brought this resolution to honor Ashanti and, memorialize her. Her aunt is a good friend of mine. And William Lamberth stood up on the floor and argued that, no, we shouldn't do this because it's said that she was doing something, that she had some marijuana on her, or, something like this, like that we shouldn't be honoring somebody. She was never charged, convicted, anything of anything. And this was a girl who was a hero in her community, who was shot, and just in honor of her family, they were doing this. And he made it sound like on the floor, like literally, I didn't even know when he was saying Ashanti, I did not know that it was my friend's niece and that they were talking about. And I'm thinking, wow, this girl must have really done something horrible, committed some awful crime, like they were robbing a bank and she got shot after, I didn't even know. But then I found out it was that, suspected had marijuana or something like that. And so they voted no. He got I've never seen it happen before. He got his majority to vote that down. And I just thought it was the most inhumane thing that I had ever seen. We all make mistakes. We honored Rush Limbaugh. He's probably taken more drugs than Timothy Leary. And they honored him. They voted to honor him on the House floor, but they wouldn't honor this teenager who got shot and died and who was a hero in her community. And so I was so angry about it. And I went home and I typically I don't tag them in my tweets and my social media, but all I could think was the John Prine song, "Some Humans Ain't Human." And so I tweeted out there, I was like, I wish William Lambert would really listen to this song, because, you know, it's hard to see the humanity in someone who does. I mean, the floor was in shock.
Just another lack of empathy. It's awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about the governor. I think a lot of progressives in Knoxville probably share my view that, you know, Bill Haslam was a great mayor, and then he became governor, and it was like he'd been lobotomized, and suddenly he was a totally different person. But I think even as disappointed as a lot of us were with Haslam, it could have been a lot worse. He did try to prioritize some education initiatives. He did try to expand healthcare. And then we got Bill Lee. And it seems like that's our much worse scenario. That's kind of as bad as it can be, it feels like. So did you have any sort of regular contact with Governor Haslam when he was in office? Do you have regular contact with Governor Lee now? And then can you tell us a little bit about the differences between the two governors from your point of view in terms of their leadership style and how it's really changed the tone of how things are happening in Nashville?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is, you know, certainly I disagreed with Bill Haslam a lot on policy. Sometimes I agreed with him. And, you know, it's the same with any governor, whether on my side of the aisle or the other. Sometimes I'm going to agree on policy and sometimes I'm not. The biggest difference I see is that Bill Haslam had some idea how to govern. And he also knew who was effective and who wasn't. And I'm not saying he did a great job. Some of his commissioners were not the best, but government was certainly more functional. With Governor Lee, it seems like he puts in cronies and, you know, people who will, sounds very similar to someone else. People will do with the department what he wants done with the department, whether it serves Tennesseans or not. And, oh gosh, the perfect example is unemployment, the labor department, and them not having a clue how to deal with what we knew was coming with all the layoffs. We knew that we had to hire a ton of people for that department. We told them that. We knew that we had to boost up the computer system, all of those things, and they did none of it. None of it. And then you look what the mess we're in with contact tracing right now. I just talked to a parent of 6 kids, and what he's dealing with positive cases and contact tracing that didn't come till almost 2 weeks after, you know, they got sent home. And if you look at what happened, they didn't even, like when we shut down, he should have had rapid testing, getting that in line for when we reopen. He should have hired hundreds, if thousands. I think 5,000 is probably what we need, contact tracers statewide, you know, and gotten PPE in order. And he did none of those things. So the first ad for contact tracers on the state website, I think was July 14th or 15th. Yeah, they should have been trained and been out there by then. We knew this at the end of March. They could have been hired by mid-April, trained and ready to go. It's just a travesty how people in unemployment with 8, 10, 12 weeks without a paycheck because they couldn't get it done. And I know it's a lot. I don't think that you can go from doing 3,000 a week to do 100,000 a week without some glitches. But please, that was just ridiculous. And, you know, it's always the person who's sitting there listening to the stories of these folks. It's heart-wrenching of what they're going through. And you're just doing your best, and you've got to call them and tell them and say, well, give me all your information, and hopefully you'll get a call within 7 days. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's, you know, he's not on the front lines talking to people, and it just should never have happened. And I know everybody had trouble, but my understanding is they've got a cruddy system that they've been begging, people have been begging them to update for years, and they wouldn't pay for it. And as always, when you pay a little bit on the front end It's going to benefit you, 10. And they do not look down the road. They look at what's right in front of their face. Bill Haslam, when you talked about Medicaid expansion, for the first 2 years, oh, this will bankrupt us. He was using all the Republican talking points on that. And then he goes, oh, wait, this is going to be devastating if we don't do this. And he had to reverse course. And some of his people just flipped around when he said to flip around. But a lot of them were just like, he had educated them that was horrible, it was evil, it was socialism, and they couldn't make the turn. And he was willing to use political capital when it came to his gas tax, but he was not willing to use it on healthcare. And, so he did some decent things. The Tennessee Promise, he did some things that I like. Not a lot, but he did some. And so he understood how some things worked, and he had some good, decent people that worked for him. And now, don't even get me started on the education department and what a wreck it is, and what a wreck he put in charge. And I'm certain that was direction from Betsy DeVos.
I'm going to get you started because that's my next question. So Education Commissioner Penny Schwinn and Governor Lee have been pushing for schools to resume in person, but same sort of thing as unemployment. We've known since March that there was a problem. There's been a failure to plan at every level. They've not really provided much in the way of guidelines for how to open schools safely. I mean, they had guidelines, but it was very, very vague. They're refusing to issue waivers for standardized testing, despite the fact that school districts across the state are asking that testing not happen this year. How do you think schools reopening should have been approached this year? And what do you think is best for our teachers and our kids when we discuss education in the midst of a pandemic? Well,
Best would have been first granting the teachers a raise as they promised. The money is there. In this budget, we're putting over $500 million into the rainy day fund. I had an amendment to the budget that would allow the teachers to get their raise, and the Republicans voted it down. This is talking to parents and talking to kids. This is the toughest year that teachers have ever had, trying to learn something new and trying to be effective and trying to do it right. They've all asked that we don't do the high stakes testing for the kids. Today, I got a bunch of emails from teachers saying, how tough it was to go to online, especially with third graders who you're trying to teach them about the technology through the technology if they don't have parents there and that sort of thing. And we're going to go and evaluate teachers this year. That's insanity. And so I'm going to fight like heck to make sure we don't evaluate those kids and don't evaluate those teachers. We should just supervisors should be in those classrooms and on those Zooms or however they're doing it, asking, how can I help? What can we do to help you guys? How can I support this? It's tough for the kids. It's tough for the teachers. It's tough for the parents. How do we make this the best possible? And one of the ways, of course, we didn't do was making sure we were using CARES Act funds to enhance our schools, not at the level that we just gave each school, but more than that. Because the reality is, if I would have done it, I would have used the Harvard model that says you do not open unless you have a less than 10% transmission rate. And then you open the younger ones first, and then you add, and it was a great model, incredibly sensible. It was probably more, I would have probably tightened it up a little bit even, but I would compromise for that, because at least it gave definite metrics when you can open, when you shut back down. And that is my concern in talking to all the people that I talk to. There's a better metric now than there was to start, but the things that are supposed to be taking place during this aren't necessarily, and that's because there's not enough of it in place. And so I would like to have seen a comprehensive statewide plan where every county, they said, well, you can't do the same thing in every county because the counties are different. Sure, but if you have a basic metric for the state, then each county, depending on what level they're at, they can open or not open, do distance learning or not. The reality is, even if you have a statewide metric that's the same, it's going to look different in different counties of what's happening any particular week. But without that, and without rapid testing, and without contact tracing, we're not going to contain this virus. And if you can't contain the virus, the economy's not coming back. And that's what they don't understand. They think that they can put people back everywhere and make it look like everything's normal. But did you see the cases over the weekend? It's not normal.
Switching gears, and this is our final question. You sponsored the Open Meetings Act so that government meetings would be required to be streamed over the internet. Do you think it would also be a good idea to have civics classes in high schools actually be required to watch some of these government meetings and discuss them afterwards? Would that possibly interest some students in local and state level politics and allow them to see how policy can affect their day-to-day lives?
I would love to see a civics class, or whether it's, how we do government. I'd love to see all of that retooled. I think that there's a way that we can really make people engaged and make them love it. But I don't think it's by a legal mandate. I think that it's more by allowing teachers to work together, teachers in those departments to work together to come up with a fun, engaging curriculum for that. I used to have so much fun at election time, and I was not political before 2008 at all. But have you ever seen, like, they still do it, the world's smallest political quiz. And then there's another one that's a little bit larger, and I would always have my kids take those quizzes and find out which candidate they lined up the most with. And then I would have them research the candidate and design a bumper sticker, and just do stuff like that. And they had so much fun. And the really interesting thing was they would often, very often, line up with a candidate they never expected. And so they had to learn about somebody that they didn't know about. And we just had so much fun through the election season, just kind of participating in that way. But it's really, how we vote in Knoxville and Knox County is kind of crazy with these odd year and even year elections, and nobody really understands when you're voting on this and when you're voting on that. I had people contact me because, I've already got my absentee ballot. I ordered it in July. Like, the July ballot was for August. You've got to order another ballot for November. It's confusing. And before I got involved politically, I didn't know who my state rep was. I didn't know who my council person was. I was teaching school and going to hear live music, and that's what I did, And I voted regularly, but I probably didn't vote in primaries. I think I just voted in general elections and, didn't realize the importance of the primaries. I wasn't involved in any party. It was, back to my dad, he was government guys, they just don't tell. I would never know what party to this day he was, because they don't talk about that.
All right. So State Representative Gloria Johnson, good luck to you.
Thank you. I think I'll need it.
Oh, no, it's not going to be terrible, but it is going to be pretty hard. So if you need to study up or whatever, it's too late. I'm going to ask you these questions. You got to answer them in the parameters I give them to you. And if you get stuck, you can yell voter fraud. Are you cool with that?
Gotcha.
All right, here we go. What's harder, teaching kids or being a politician?
Being a politician.
What's more rewarding?
That's a tough one. They're rewarding in different ways.
Well, that's your answer. I mean, it's up to you. You gonna ride that one?
I'm gonna have to.
Okay. Who spoke up for you as a little kid?
My dad.
Okay, that's cool. Bob Dylan or Queen Latifah?
Queen Latifah.
Favorite flavor of Gatorade?
The red ones.
Okay. Mountains or beach?
Tough one too, but I have to go with beach.
Pickup trucks or convertibles?
Convertibles.
Living large or smack talking?
Living large.
Okay, good answer. Hey, what'd you want to be when you were 10?
A teacher.
Okay. Last place you got carry-out food from?
Chef Ben's.
Did you get an allowance when you were a little kid?
Yes, I did.
How much?
It seems like it was like $1 a week, maybe.
And did you have to do chores to earn it?
Of course.
Okay. A place in the world you've always wanted to visit?
New Zealand.
Who was your favorite Charlie's Angel? Kate Jackson, Jacqueline Smith, or Farrah Fawcett?
Well, I have to go with Farrah since Steve Hundley always gives me a hard time about my hair when it's curled.
Okay, fair enough. Snickers or Milky Way?
Snickers.
The Stones or the Grateful Dead?
Stones.
Would you? Oh man, that bums me out.
Sorry, man. Like a contest, not a contest. We can talk
Okay.
about that.
Oh my gosh, that's painful. Okay, would you rather have a chef or a maid?
A chef.
Oh, good answer. Okay, a bikini or a one piece?
One piece.
Craft beer or expensive scotch?
Craft beer.
At a party, are you dancing or telling jokes?
I'm telling jokes while I'm dancing.
Okay, good answer. Live music or church service?
Oh, live music.
Drag queens or drag racing?
Drag queens.
Dolly Parton or Peyton Manning?
Dolly Parton by a long shot.
Oh, I love you. That's the perfect answer. Who would you like to see run for office, locally or nationally?
I still love Jason Kander nationally. I really like what he does.
Okay. Trick Daddy or Childish Gambino?
Oh, that's a tough one. Childish Gambino.
What's one legislation that'll change the lives of all Tennesseans?
Expanded Medicaid.
I knew you were going to say that, and that's a great answer. Go for a hike, a bike ride, or a kayak?
Kayak.
A beer, a soda, or a glass of wine?
Yeah, all those.
In any order. Okay. What was your first job?
My first job?
Yeah.
Rack's roast beef.
Oh my God, what'd you do?
I sliced sandwiches and I worked the counter, man. I did it all.
And what did you make an hour?
I think it was 5 something an hour.
25, I'll bet it was. Okay, that's good.
I had the coolest gig for high school because I got out of school at noon and I could work from noon to 4. And so all my nights were free in high school. What everybody else, if they worked nights. And I was always free.
And you had a little cash in your pocket.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, perfect. There you go. You survived it.
Thank you.
Well, that's all the questions we have. We always give the candidate an opportunity to wrap things up and say anything that was missed or that you want to hit at the very end. So the floor is yours.
Well, I'd like to tell folks to go to my website, votegloriajohnson.com. I have a lot more information than most people put on their websites because I think it's important that people see the policy that I support, who I am, and not listen to what others say about who I am, because there's a lot of that going around, and I'm easy to reach. 865-660-9800 is my cell. If you have a question about where I am on policy, you can call me and we can talk about it, and I will tell you the truth. But the thing is, don't let other people define you. And please go vote and take 10 of your very best friends, and maybe just somebody you happen to run into.